speakers. Fellow Toastmasters, my name is Kristi Speech. The speech today, and I totally lost my train of thought. Thank you for making me laugh in the last speech. I wanted to bring to you a few things that, kind of like the first topic, something about where I was, where I am, and where I'm going that might relate to all or most of you in this room. Because for the most part, I'm a few years older than most of you, which is kind of unusual in most of the Toastmaster meetings I've attended. And it's something about when you write and when you speak, often they're related. And I was thinking about this because if you start going to more and more Toastmaster meetings and you start competing in contests, there's going to be a point when you may be asked to be a demo speaker or a model speaker for the evaluation contest. How many people in here have attended some of those area contests? Okay, 2 of you. So I'm going to give a little bit more background on this. At the area level, what happens during the evaluation contest is they have one test speaker, and that test speaker basically is evaluated by between 4 to 6 people. And I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to do that for a couple of areas. And it was the same speech, essentially. It was about tennis and Toastmasters. I won't go into it. But one set of feedback was completely different than the other. And I was trying to figure out, well, what happened? The speech was essentially the same. But what happened is there were things that I included, and then there were things that I left out. And kind of like speaking, kind of like writing, it's all about editing. And so if you take anything away from tonight, I want you to consider yourself editors along with being speakers. Now, kind of going back to, as the first speaker talked about where I was. 20 years ago, I graduated college, UC Santa Cruz. Totally different environment than this one. Lots of trees, you have deers running around. If you walk around in your bare feet, you might step on a slug. Not the most, it was fun. It was a fun campus. But what I learned when I was writing papers, I was a politics major, so I had to write a lot of papers. I don't know if any of you guys are in the soft sciences, the liberal arts sciences. What our technique in writing papers that I was trained in is that you wrote everything on index cards. And then you kind of piece together those index cards, and again, this is before the internet, try to imagine that. You piece together those index cards and you put together your analysis. And then in your analysis, you edited things in and you edited things out. And I would later realize this was kind of something that I would end up taking with me to Toastmasters. And kind of like those 2 speeches that I gave. How come one speech was better than the other? How come one paper was better than the other? It wasn't that maybe I spent more time on it. It was what I edited. What did I include? What didn't I include? Obviously, you're going to spend a lot more time and energy and a lot more detail on a 30-page final paper than you are on a final you have to write in class, right? So then, let's fast forward a little bit. A few years ago, I became a Toastmaster. And I was giving a presentation on Arab Spring. I was giving an 8 to 12 minute speech on the revolutions in Egypt and Tunisia. I don't know how many of you are foreign policy buffs. I lived in Egypt for a few years. I lived in Egypt for 1 year. I traveled to Tunisia. So I have the personal insights, but I didn't know all of the historical background. But I wanted to present this information to my club to make it relevant to them. What did I fall back on? When I was putting this information together, what did I fall back on? My handy little index card. Kind of like the second speaker. I didn't write everything I used to present the speech, but I presented a few pertinent details that I knew I would forget. Like, for example, maybe you all have seen it. There was a fruit vendor in Tunisia that set himself on fire, blasted all over YouTube. Does anybody know the name of that person? Or what date it happened? I don't know. But it was incredibly relevant to my speech because that's what, by all purposes, kind of started the revolution. He set himself on flame. There was a YouTube video. I didn't want to just describe it. I wanted to give this person a name. I wanted to use the right name. And if I didn't write Mohammed Bouazi, December 17, 2010, on an index card, along with other historical information, I don't think it would have made as much sense to my listeners. So where I am now, where I'm going. For the last 15 years, I've worked as an analyst for the state of California, mostly in unemployment. Hopefully none of you guys will have to deal with my office. I know we're getting close to graduation. Editing also became important along with the public speaking because I would need to take notes, kind of like in college. I would be taking notes on a clipboard such as this. I would meet with my boss at her desk, maybe a gentlewoman like you or a gentleman like you, and I would have a couple of minutes to get the information she wanted me to have, plus do some research. Remember that researching you guys are doing in college? Guess what? It does pay off. And then you take your notes and you put them into your analysis. And editing in and editing out and trying to figure out what you're going to include and what you're not going to include is incredibly important. Because if you only have 5 minutes to present something to your boss, or if she's walking by your desk and she says, what do I need to present to this legislator? You're not going to give her all the details. You're not going to give her the Mohammed Bouazi December 10th, 2010 detail that you may think is helpful, but may not necessarily help or present this information to a legislator. So I want you guys to think about this. Whether or not you're in Toastmasters, whether or not you're getting ready for another final, whether or not you're getting ready for group presentations, it sounds like a few of you are, I want you guys to think about the importance of editing. Editing, you can do it either on Post-its, you can write it on a clipboard, you can write it on your hand. I'm not sure why I brought this pen up here. My apologies. That's one of those bad habits when you're a Toastmaster. Leave the pen at the desk. But editing is as important as speaking itself. Learn how to edit, and you're on the right track. Mr. Toastmaster.